Welcome back to the Life of Tash. I'm Tash. So we've got part 2 today with the talk with Hayley and me. So if you missed part 1, go and watch it. But Hayley is an entrepreneur. She's founder of Kaya, which is a funding marketplace democratizing female founders access to capital. We fast became friends, both doing our Vita certification coaching under Layla Martin. And today we're diving into vulnerability, pain, and the armor we build to protect ourselves from feeling too much, and what it actually takes to grow without losing yourself in the process. We're also getting into the cultural battle once again between men and women right now, and the trade-offs we make as kids between authenticity versus love, and why spirituality isn't just aesthetic, it's also our survival. Welcome back, Hayley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we had a great first one, and now we're getting back into it. I wanted to start today to talk about vulnerability because vulnerability is something that I'm so passionate about in the work that I do. It's for me, vulnerability is the only way that you're going to live the most beautiful, authentic life. But a lot of the time, people still don't view vulnerability as strength. They view it as a weakness. And I find this is especially true when we're thinking about men. And I know, like, I've had conversations with you about people who I've dated in the past who have said, you know, people with children and sons who have said, I will never teach my son to be vulnerable. And I just found that is the most soul-crushing thing that you can hear in this day and age. Like, what do you think about, like, vulnerability in society today?
So I will always reference my astrology. I literally do it all the time. So I think a lot about vulnerability, especially as a double Pisces. And I do also want to say that astrology is the basis for every science that exists today. So that's also like really a feminist statement to be like, I'm going to reference my astrology in a world that has condemned that as something that's stupid and woo-woo and invaluable. As a double Pisces, I have felt deeply my entire life, almost to the point where it has felt otherworldly. Like, how am I feeling this intensity as I'm standing at a bus stop? But navigating how to be vulnerable in a way that feels safe and also feels true has been a real journey for me, because something that I was having discussions about in my early 20s was how there's been some sort of like warped societal conditioning where we feel like we need to overshare in order to create a bond with someone. And I used to really believe that. And it used to feel really bad. And so throughout the years, understanding what vulnerability truly is and understanding that it's actually empowering, it's not disempowering, has been life-changing for me. And I think I'm constantly assessing myself as to what is being appropriately vulnerable and with whom can I be vulnerable with is, I feel like, a forever journey. But I agree with you. I think vulnerability is absolutely essential in really creating authentic, deep bonds with another person.
100%. I love what you said about oversharing was used as a method to bond with people. I can so relate to that. Sometimes I think you're right. It's like a fast track to try and to bond with people, but it can also backfire. Like, I was listening to Brene Brown and she was talking about vulnerability, and it needs to be done at the same time as you build trust. And it was such an interesting way she explained this, because if you are vulnerable with someone before you have an established trust, it can actually make the other person feel really uncomfortable because there's not that foundation of trust. And it'll actually more likely push people away. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people actually do that oversharing in that vulnerable state as a way to, I guess I would describe it as self-sabotaging, because they actually know it's going to confirm their bias of that, oh, no one's here for me. Or like, I push everyone away, or like, do you know what I mean? But actually, and it can actually be used as a tactic from people, I think sometimes subconsciously. Or we get, you know, confirmed beliefs around, well, I tried being vulnerable, it didn't work, I'm never going to be vulnerable again. And I think she explained a story that happened with her child who shared a secret with their two best friends at school, or not two best friends, but two friends at school. And it was very vulnerable. And then she came to class and the whole 30 kids knew. And so her child came home is like, I'm never going to trust anyone again. She's like, no. And she has this jelly bean jar, I think, oh no, marbles in a jar theory, where she's like, with people, you know, when they do things to earn your trust, you give them a marble. And so you build up your marbles and they're the people you're vulnerable with. And I'm like, that is such a good analogy. And especially the way I'd never really thought about the interlink between vulnerability and trust.
Oh, absolutely. I think too, something that came to mind when you were describing that, as someone who is a recovering codependent, there's also a manipulative mechanism in oversharing too soon with somebody. There's this, whether it's conscious or subconscious, but there's a degree of manipulation there. And I am going to essentially trauma dump onto somebody who I don't know, who could very well feel really uncomfortable with this because I want them to like me. I want them to bond to me. And it's highly manipulative.
Also, I think what you said before about, sharing too much is not just about that, not just about like wanting to overshare and get them to like you. I also think it shows you don't have boundaries.
100%. Yeah.
And and look, I have been guilty of this myself where I've left situations. And I don't think it's because I've ever wanted someone to like me, but maybe there was a bit of nervousness in their interaction or I needed to fill space. And so I said things that later on I viscerally knew I shouldn't have said. And I hated that feeling. And I'm like, and that feeling is when you know a boundary's been crossed.
Right.
And I let my own boundary be crossed because I shared something that actually I didn't want to share. So I think there's also a really good conversation around boundaries as well when it comes to vulnerability.
Oh, 100%. I feel like it's just this, it creates this portal of really getting to know yourself in a multitude of ways and also really assessing your boundaries. And what's interesting about vulnerability is it's often that you are the one who crosses your boundary.
Yeah.
And you said something so great to me a couple of weeks ago about how we don't know our boundaries until they've been crossed. And I think when it comes to, I guess, practicing vulnerability, we get to learn about our boundaries, not necessarily from another person violating them, but from ourselves violating our own boundary.
That is so beautifully said. It's so true. And I also say, because people struggle, like, and I said this when we were talking about it, people always say to me, like, how do I know what my boundaries are? And I always say, you'll know when they get crossed. And you'll know it because you'll feel it in your body. Generally, that's how we actually know. It's because we'll feel it in our gut or we'll feel it somewhere, which, also leads to another point. You need to be dropped into your body enough to kind of to feel it. So I think some people who are really disconnected from their body can struggle with boundaries because they're not connected enough to their body to know when it's crossed. But I think it's interesting because I think vulnerability really, there is so much strength in being vulnerable. But at the same time, it's like if you use it correctly. Yeah. And I think it was such an important conversation because I'm always someone who's pushing, especially men teaching their sons, you have to teach people to be vulnerable. Like it's the only way you're going to live a good life. And the only way you're going to be really able to be authentic and connect and not have shame. But I'm like, if you don't actually use it in the way that is empowering, it does become a weakness. And it wasn't something I'd really considered before.
100%. And I think too, and it's not to say that women don't display these kinds of traits, but I think in terms of how men are socialized to not be vulnerable, to not feel their feelings, men really are being socialized like sociopaths. And we're seeing how that's impacting men today whose emotional intelligence is very low, who can't create deep emotional bonds with specifically their female partners. I mean, of course, it applies to everybody. But, for example, also like the men's loneliness epidemic, I think there's a lot to say about how men are socialized in terms of whether or not they're allowed to be vulnerable and how that's impacting them later on in their lives.
100%. I was actually having this conversation this morning with someone about the rise of AI partnerships.
Oh my God.
And how we could both fully understand how it's going to happen. Because there is a lot of people out there who find having a partner, approaching women or approaching whatever sex they're interested in or gender, and they can't do it because they haven't been socialized to. They struggle they struggle forming bonds in this isolated, lonely epidemic that we've created. They struggle probably even speaking to someone face to face these days, because you can basically run your life, have a job, and not have to talk to anyone face to face. And so I can completely understand how there's already people having AI relationships. Just wait till you can actually have them in a robotic form in your house.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that far-fetched of an idea as someone who would say, like, I don't think that's the way I would go. But I'm like, I can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not, like, humans are just getting into this way where we can't be vulnerable with each other.
Yeah. And I think, of course, I think this is pretty evident. The majority of people who are forming these AI relationships are men. And I think as women, and sort of like what I was saying in the first episode, how we've really depended on one another for our survival, our emotional relationships with one another as well. I feel like there are so many more women who have gotten to have the lived experience of how powerful it is to be vulnerable with another human being, specifically our friends, our sisters, our mothers, our aunties, the women in our lives. But I feel like there's such a massive group of men who have never had that experience and haven't had the lived experience of how vulnerability can be so powerful, so life affirming. And so instead of, again, because they've been socially conditioned like sociopaths, a lot of them, instead of kind of going down that road, also because it's so attributed to like femininity, which is something that most men are also socialized into believing is a horrible thing, they're turning to AI partners. So I think in many ways it's not surprising, but I think it's also not surprising that it's men mostly
100%
leaning into that.
I know we just breached upon like the whole men versus women thing, and I want to talk about that today, but you said a really good point with the loneliness epidemic. And men, I do believe it is affecting men more than women, because women do have that, as you've like explained, historically we have friends around us who we can go and like talk to and be vulnerable and stuff. Men don't seem to have those relationships as much as women. Also, when a man has a breakdown, they've said this, say their relationship or their marriage breaks down, normally it's been the female who drives the social aspect to the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so when they don't have that anymore, they don't have the skills to do it or the know-how. And so there is this big loneliness epidemic. And I think at the moment there is a bit of this rise about, men versus women. Women has become, as we're getting more empowered, which I think goes hand in hand with financial independence. I don't think women will ever be liberated until we have that. I don't think we're there yet, but we're on the way. And I think men, obviously, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before. They're struggling to find their place in society now. They used to have a very defined role, the provider of the family, and now they don't have that role anymore, and they're really lost. And I know, like, the feminist side of me is like, well, fuck you. No one laid out a golden road for us. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, we had to fight it for ourselves. And so you guys go and figure it out. But I know that we've been talking about women can be extremely healing for men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, being in this certification has really changed, I think, the way that you and I have been having these conversations. And also, so the two of us are majoring in men's sexuality. And something that I heard in one of the lectures the other day was how women over time, we've really been able to be creative with our roles in society, the more economically powerful we've become. So we've been able to really redefine our place in the world, our place in a family constellation, in professional settings, so on and so forth. We've really kind of like taken the reins, and we've been doing that for a while now. Men have not done that. And so we're finding men globally who are like, oh my God, what is happening? What is my purpose? What is my role? I don't have the social skills and I don't have the tools to resource in a way that I need to support myself to understand my place in this world. Mm-hmm. And there are men, there's not a lot. There are some men who are supporting other men, guiding other men into understanding their place in the world, new roles that they can take on that are affirming, that are powerful, that are important. but nowhere near enough men that are doing that. And so, yeah, I think we're seeing really devastating effects of the way that men have been socialized in a world that has been very rigid in terms of who they have to be in this society.
And I do have, I think, a lot of empathy for them. And, you know, and I mean, look, this is why there's the rise of the Andrew Tates in this world. Like, boys and men do not have a lot of safe spaces to kind of figure out what is this new role, or what do I want to, what is my place in this new world? I actually think you're right. I think it's very powerful when men lead men. And I think that is a really amazing way to try and do it. But you're right, I don't think there's enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we know, men hold men socially accountable. Women don't. Yeah. So, you know, we see on social media, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but women that are, you know, essentially trying to teach men a lesson, and they just get angry. Yeah. Men don't listen to women like they listen to men.
That's a very good point. Do you think, therefore, what is the best way for if a woman wants to help heal a man, though?
I mean, first off, I'd say you can't do that. Yeah. You know, only individuals can heal themselves. Like, we can certainly inspire the people we love in our lives to heal, but it's no one's job to heal another person. I feel like for women who want to support men, I actually don't know if I'm the most appropriate person to ask that question, even though, yes, you know, I have been in this certification and starting to major in men's sexuality. I would say I would be really conscious of whether or not that feels true, because that's a really big job, especially to be speaking publicly to men, especially on the internet, especially in these like political times. So I guess I would say to any women who want to support men, I would say be really responsible in the way that you assess what that would look like to you.
Yeah, I mean, to me, for someone who has been working, obviously, like, I have a high percentage of male clients when it comes to what I'm doing in regards to as a dominatrix. Obviously, I'm moving in a different direction now, so I'm getting more of a split between genders. But traditionally, what I have seen and what I would say from my perspective is really coming down to holding that safe space. Like, to me, for someone to have a safe space where they can be vulnerable, not feel shamed, not feel judged, and be able to play out their authentic, who they are, like, authentically inside. That's how I've seen people heal. And that's not necessarily me healing them. That's me providing the space for them to be able to heal themselves. So, like, I think, yeah, more safe spaces is what is needed.
Definitely. And to be held by people who can truly hold those spaces from a place of integrity.
Yeah. Another thing, like, we always talk about is, like, the amount of amazing women out there. Like, we always talk about, women are doing a lot of self-work. Like, I'm so inspired when I go out and talk to women and, like, all the amazing modalities they do. And, like, you know, we have our, like, client intake form, and I ask people, like, what modalities have you tried? Women are always like, oh, I've tried this and this and this. Like, they're so enthusiastic. Do you think that women are getting to a point where we're just outgrowing the male population?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, yeah. And I think that's why so many men and women are not coping well.
And the disintegration of relationships.
100%. And we've seen that a lot this year. Relationships are tanking. People are moving apart, or really realizing that actually they're not right for each other. Yeah, I think it's affecting not just men, though. I think we are, as women, fed this narrative that someday we're going to find the one. I mean, oh my goodness, when I look back on my past, like, it makes me sick how completely enmeshed in that narrative I once was. But we're told you're going to find the one. You know, someday there will be a man who will love you, who will be all the things that you've needed. You know, bullshit, completely fucking bullshit. And we are social animals at the end of the day. We want love. We want to give love. And so I think a lot of women are, and I love this phrase, just like dying the deaths of realizing that that fantasy was actually never real. And in the world that we're living in, because of the way that men are socialized, it's getting harder and harder for women who are out here doing the work to find a partner who could be a really good fit to them. And yeah, I think men are not coping either, especially as they're getting older. That's something that I've come to realize, like men in their 20s and their 30s, they're like, fuck it. Like, you know, I don't need women. I'm good. But I do notice, and we can see this with the suicide statistics, depression statistics as well. The older men get, the more it seems like a lot of them realize, oh, actually, like a really solid partnership with someone who I'm emotionally connected to is what I really want. And less men are experiencing that, especially as the divorce rates are skyrocketing.
And I feel women are doing the opposite as they're getting older. Like so many women that I talk to are like, I don't want a partner. Like they're like, I might want a man for every so often, but they're like, I just want to be with myself.
Hi.
Yeah. Like that's not an uncommon conversation I'm having with people. And I think a bull master Tay said it, you can't ungrow. So the problem is if a woman is in a relationship with a man, and look, this can happen in any gender dynamic, but we are seeing it more in the heterosexual kind of relationships. The woman's going to done all this work, all this growth. And then she's kind of, I always think of it like, you know, she's up, you know, gone up here. It's very hard for her to grow backwards. So the only option is the partner either needs to join them up there or they split, because the third option of ungrowing is not possible. So that's what I'm seeing happening more and more. Do you think though there is a point that becomes where self-growth is, I don't know if hindrance is the right word, but like it's doing more harm than good? Like are we sometimes overdoing the self-growth?
As women?
Anyone. But yeah, I think women in particular. Like is there a point where we're just doing way too much?
I think it depends. I think if it's coming from a place of lack, then that would be something to look at. But I think we're here, and you know, this is just what I believe. I'm not saying this is like an absolute truth, but I think we're here to collect as many experiences as possible. And, you know, if it feels like one's truth, to also expand as much as possible. And so I think if you're somebody that's on, you know, quote unquote, a healing path, and you want to explore all the modalities, you want to sit in all the ceremonies because that feels true, I think go hard, you know, have a great life, enjoy. Like you're going to learn so much. You're going to experience yourself as so many different versions of you. I think though, something that we definitely see, especially in the kind of like quote unquote healing spiritual spaces, yeah, there are a lot of people who feel like they need to do all the things because they'll never be healed enough or evolved enough. You know, it's coming from a lack consciousness. Then I think that would be something to take a look at. But in terms of like, oh, should we stop personal development because we'll never be able to find a partner? I would say no, like don't even invest in that narrative.
Yeah, because I think like if we had that growth mindset, it'd just be like, if we go back to keeping ourselves small, which is what women did for a very long time. Keep yourself small, fit into what society expects of you. And I just don't think you're living a very authentic life if that's the way you're approaching it. Speaking of authenticity, I really love, you know, one thing that really, you know, I'm a massive Gabor Mate fan, massive. And he always talks about the trade-off we make as children. We trade off being our authentic selves in order to get love. And as a child, we need that love to survive. But as an adult, we are fully capable human beings by that point, and we're not dependent on someone else's for our survival. But we've been so wired in our nervous systems as kids to trade that authenticity out. So I think people get to adulthood, and one, a lot of people don't even know who the fuck they are. Or two, their nervous system is so conditioned that I need to be like XYZ in order to get love, and that actually equals survival in their nervous system. How do you think that's like showing up in today's, you know, it is a very, like he always says, we live in a toxic society. I don't think anyone can like disagree with that. How do you think, like for you, what do you see as that showing up in today's society?
Yeah. So one of the places where I've really seen it a lot actually has been definitely like in our certification and also outside. Just I feel like the more we've been doing work with our bodies specifically and really having, again, the lived experience of what it feels like to live in one's body, I've noticed with women specifically the way that we respond to social interaction. For example, like loud, kind of like abrasive laughter is something that I've been just noticing a lot as I've been changing, and I've been just sort of like releasing a lot of conditioning I had around just performing and like social performances and what was polite. And I will say definitely over this year, I have noticed that the more I've just been more true to myself, the more incredible women I've had enter my life, but also the more I've really rubbed people the wrong way. And it has often been the people who are still very wrapped up in that kind of like, I need to be this in public. This is like the correct way to respond to this. It's very robotic. Like it's not authentic. So yeah, I think the way that I've been seeing that a lot over this year has been in the way that I've been observing women in social interactions specifically, and also noticing it because I used to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. Again, I was having a conversation the other day about when you really trigger someone, like, especially with what I do, like there can be people who have very strong opinions about me and not just even my job, but also the way I live my life, the fact that I'm a mother, the fact like so many aspects of me seem to offend some people. But I was having this conversation as I said to someone, like, if I'm really triggering such, like, you cannot like me, I have no problem with that. You might look at me like, you know, I don't agree with that lifestyle. I don't agree with your perspective. Cool. But you know, those people that just get so triggered by you and they just like, they will go out on a rampage. I'm like, those people really don't bother me because we are mirrors. And if I am triggering that much of a response to something that is not affecting your life, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm definitely not affecting you. If you have that much of a response, what's going on behind the facade? And I think those are the people who are probably living the most inauthentic lives at the end of the day.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so interesting when you start to see it from that lens of like, we're all mirrors to one another. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about the course we've been studying, because it has been completely life-changing, I think, for the both of us. And I think one of the things that really has made me aware of, and like one of the things that really has stood out for me is like, we're doing somatic work as well. Like we're not completely cutting off the mind. It's like top down. So it's like mind to body and body to mind. But it's a lot of focus on somatic and being in the body. But one of the things that really stood out to me was you don't have to go down the story in order to heal.
Yes.
Like, especially with the trauma stuff. Like you don't have to go down the rabbit hole. What has been your take about that?
Oh my goodness. I've loved that so much. And actually it has been so valuable to be partnered with you for so many of my practices, because you are really good at determining when someone is like really going into their trauma. And you really already had this like foundational understanding of the fact that like we actually don't have to re-traumatize ourselves over and over again to work through our shit. So yeah, that's been such a powerful experience for me, especially as somebody who has been around a lot of people throughout my life who are still very rooted in their past. And I'm, guilty of doing that a lot and still working through a lot of that myself. But yeah, it's been really life-changing to be able to go into the body and just kind of dig up all the richness that's right here. That's not living in the past, that's not living in the future, but that's right here to support me resourcing in the now. And that's something that I love so much about this work, is that there's really this like core, the intention is to thrive. And I really understand from doing this that going back to the ruins of one's past isn't usually conducive with thriving in the present.
100%. And I think people think, because it's not like we don't go to where it came from. Like we go there, we have like heaps of tools and and blueprinting practices where we go back to, inner child pieces and, parental caregiver figures. But you don't go down this, I think, as I said before, you don't go down that rabbit hole of the story of like, oh yeah, like I like this, and you're reliving the moment. We're actually looking at it from getting empowered from it, getting empowered from the wisdom of that relationship with that caregiver and taking back the ownership of that now as an adult, or getting wisdom from our inner child and getting, again, empowered to how it's affecting us now. And I thought also it's just made me connect pieces together to find out like, oh, that's why I am the way I am. And especially a lot of things I even have highlighted in my relationship where I'm like, oh, it's not about them. Yeah. Like this has come from me. Yeah. Like this has really come back from things that I learned in my childhood, things that was conditioned into me. And another thing I think we talked about the other day is like, I was always someone who's like, oh, everyone's trying to blame the childhood. Oh, yeah. And then I'm like, you know what? Like a lot came from our childhood, and you don't even need to have had some huge traumatic childhood, or why, like, I know we said like everyone has traumas, like you can't get through life today without getting some sort of just even societal trauma on you. Even if you've had a relatively normal, in inverted like commas, childhood, our nervous system gets programmed at such a young age, and it affects us in our adulthood. And until you actually go and understand that, like you can't really move through those blockages.
Yeah. Often it's everyone else's fault. We're living fully in victimhood. And I think too, coming from individualistic societies, sometimes that can be really hard to identify. Like that was really hard for me to identify in myself, how much of my life I had lived from a place of victim consciousness, because I was always hyper independent. I can do it. I've done all these things. I'm resourceful. I figured it out. I'm not a victim. So yeah, I think there's a lot to say about that.
I mean, even things that I thought were positives in me, like I've always been very achievement focused. Like we've talked about this, like achieve. And then I also have a massive problem with switching off. I can't relax. And then if I do take time off, I'm spending the whole time going, you should be working, you should be achieving. No one ever got to where you want to go without working hard. And then I'm like, oh, that comes back from my childhood. Like that was drilled into me. I grew up in a very achievement-focused household. That's how I got love. And it's not even just looking at things I thought were bad, about me. It's like, oh, these are things that I thought were actually positives, but they're not serving me. And I can't even, sit out and chill and watch a movie. Like,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely talk about this fairly often because I didn't grow up like that. Like everybody was just surviving. But there did come a point, especially since starting to build Kaya, where it was like, if I'm not working, if I'm not busting my ass, if I'm not exhausted and burnt out, my eyes are burning, if I don't feel lightheaded by the end of the day, like I can't chill. And even when I have done that, I still can't chill. So yeah, there's it's sometimes the things that we're told are good that can actually be so detrimental to our well-being.
And I think another thing, like it's really taught me, and I had learned this before because I hadn't done the course before. I kind of overcame, I hate to use the word addiction, but I guess I probably was for, post my mom's death. I've talked about this on this before. I had quite a dependency, I guess, I wasn't dealing with the post my mother's passing well. So I was doing a lot of drugs and things. And I really had to learn to sit in my body with the pain. And again, like another, Gabor Mate thing is, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And I think that's another skill this course has really, and like learning this methodology has given me, is the ability to sit in my body and identify like, why am I wanting to go to an addictive behavior or to go to a bad coping strategy? Like, what am I trying to cover up here? And getting that skill to be able to be sit in your body and feel it, like I can feel like a rumbling in my stomach, or I can feel a hole in my heart. I'm now trying to cover that up with drugs, eating, online shopping, or whatever it is that, everyone will have something they go to. People don't look at it as everything as an addiction. I mean, just before we started this podcast, I was talking to you about like social addictions.
Yeah.
How I was talking about, I think some people have social addictions where they keep going out and being in groups because they get that social high. And I said, I bet some of them are just doing it to cover pain. And so I think like that's something that's really helped me with this course, is like that return to the body.
Totally. Yeah. And also to really come to what is true that only your body could tell you, like to really enter spaces that you can't access from your mind.
No. And I think also, and I've had this already with a lot of clients who they've gone to different modalities of therapy and they know in their mind what it is or what's in their way or, what they need to do, but they can't do it. And I've had this experience too, because they've got a blockage in the body. And so until you can actually release that blockage, it doesn't matter that your mind knows it. If you don't feel like, safety is a massive one, and we're talking about this as well. If your body does not feel safe because your nervous system has had years and years of being unsafe, and our body, I always say to people, dissociation, shutting down is not something you need to be like, I've got to stop this, it's bad. Your nervous system has done its job. Your nervous system's job is to protect you. And sometimes the only way you can be protected is by shutting down, because you would not have survived otherwise. And so I have to tell people, so your body has learned to dissociate. It's learned that it's not safe. Now, in your mind, you think, I'm now really safe. Maybe I have a roof over my head. I have an income. I have a loving family. Why don't I feel safe? I know it, but I'm like, you can't think that into existence. Your nervous system needs to be rewired. And that's been massive for me.
Totally. Oh my goodness. Me too. Yeah. I have felt so much shame and so much guilt of not being able to do what some of my mentors have told me to do over the years, just because it was like, well, they could do it. They're proof that like, you just change your mindset. You just believe this thing and you can be, whatever. And there was that piece that was completely missing.
100%. I also want to talk about gratitude. I know we were talking about manifesting before, and that, this kind of manifesting epidemic. But I do think like gratitude is the highest emotion. Like we talk about this high vibrations on the I don't know if everyone knows, but there's a vibration scale, and you've got like, sadness, anger at like low vibrational frequencies, and then joy and things and gratitude are at the top. Some people think there's a bit of like a gratitude toxicity like coming out there, especially in like the spiritual realms, the pretty spiritual things. What is your version of gratitude in your life at the moment? Because I know for me, like if I can return to gratitude, even when life is kicking the shit out of me, I can always get back up. Like for you, what is gratitude for you?
I would say that I experience gratitude every day. Like I'm constantly just assessing where I'm at in my journey. And I'm very aware that I couldn't have got here without not only all the people who have been peppered along my journey, but without a lot of the contrast experiences as well. And I've lived a really colorful life too. So I constantly find myself like retelling myself stories of my life, like just out loud by myself, because I'm just so flooded with gratitude for everything that's unfolded for me, even the things that were completely devastating. I mean, of course, there are some things, that I don't think I'll ever feel grateful for necessarily, but who I chose to become as a result of those contrast experiences, I do feel deeply so much gratitude for myself. But I also, again, I think it's so important to really walk the path of at least uncovering what is authentic to you, what is true to you. Because I think in the age of social media where it's like, manifesting this and that. And like, here are the 3 things you need to know to like do this. And it's bullshit. Is when we have a connection to our bodies, it's so easy to detect what is authentic, what could potentially really be supportive to us and what isn't. And so with kind of like social media gratitude, some stuff I'm sure is really great, but I think because I already have established I know what it feels like in the body to be grateful, I don't really get clouded by anything externally. So yeah, I think gratitude is really important. I love that I can be just, I don't know, like sitting on a bus stop and just flooded with so much love for how grateful I feel for my life.
I love what you said. Like sometimes you can't be yet grateful. Well, you said I don't have gratitude for everything that's happened in my life. But I think as we move through our lives, we get more and more grateful for things we didn't once. And I completely understand there's some things like you can't force gratitude. And that's in one of the things that we've learned, where you allow, like if they're ready for it, you allow them to feel gratitude for things, but you can't force it. And I certainly know even with like my life and where I look back now on life, it's like I am grateful for everything that happened. I am grateful for, and it's this sounds so strange to even say, like I'm grateful for my mother passing, who was the most important person I wanted with me through this whole life, but it had to happen. And maybe that also comes down to spirituality. I'm happy that I didn't deal with it well, and I went through my way of covering up pain because I wouldn't have learned what I was doing, or I wouldn't have learned how to sit with my body. I wouldn't have learned the holes I was trying to fill with external things. And so I think you do get sometimes to that point in life where you are so grateful even for the shit that happens because it's where it's meant to be. And I think also like it's interesting this course and talking, just bringing up spirituality, like is an interesting course to do from the lens of spirituality, because obviously there's a basis not just in, we talked about somatics, neurobiology is involved, but it is got bases in Tantra and Taoism. Mm-hmm. So there is obviously that spirituality, but it's also been interesting to me to see that you don't need to be spiritual to get so much benefit from it.
Oh, definitely not.
Spirituality has only become important to me, I'd say, within the last 5 to 10 years of my life. I grew up in a really pretty much atheist household. But it's interesting, like, how do you see the overlap between spirituality and embodiment? Like, particularly in what we've learned and like dropping into the body, like what is your relationship between the two?
I think there's something deeply spiritual about that experience. I don't, as you said, for people who are interested in this work, you don't have to be a spiritual person to begin this, but I think it's kind of inevitable that as you lean into the kind of work that we've been doing, to recognize that there is something deeply spiritual about it as well. So I feel like there's just a natural inherent overlap. Often too, because so much of what we do and what we've been trained to do guides people into experiences that, yes, you can explain what's happening in the brain, in the nervous system, in the body, but what it does to the heart is it's so spiritual. That's just kind of the only way or that's a really great sort of like umbrella term for what happens. And so, yeah, I just feel like there's a natural overlap.
And I think like we mentioned this before about like the Instagram version of spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you feel pressured to almost play into that. And I just kind of came to the point, and I know I was like tossing this up with my business about how I want to integrate spirituality, but then I'm like, well, you're not like those people on Instagram. Like I was judging myself around my own spirituality because I'm like, well, you're not like that. Mm-hmm. You're not showing up like that. But I'm like, you know what? I do really connect with the spiritual aspect of my life, and it is really important. And no, I don't look like how it's meant to look on Instagram. And I think sometimes people shy away from spirituality within themselves because it's not looking how it's meant to look.
Yeah. And I think with what we see on Instagram, and we love this topic, we talk about it a lot. I think there's different categories of people who are consuming spiritual content. I think there's a large number of people who are consuming it because it gives them like a dopamine hit. It's a very fleeting experience. People love seeing, beautiful people and like flowy outfits on their like multi-million-dollar properties that they manifested. Like that is valuable to some people, that very polished content. But then there are other people, I think, who really resonate with content that just feels true. So yeah, I think when it comes to just social media generally and creating social media in an extremely competitive landscape, I think that's something that I return to often, especially because my relationship with social media is not great. Content creating is like my least favorite thing on earth to do. But yeah, just remembering that there are more people who are consuming that kind of content, not necessarily to change their lives, because they think it's going to change them, because they think they're going to become happier. It's really for the dopamine hit. Because as we also know, a lot of people aren't really ready either to really lean into what we've been trained to guide people through. So yeah, I think just speaking to what you were saying about like, oh, am I spiritual enough? I think that certainly helps ground me. Like however spiritual I am, and I'm not creating content around the work that we've been doing yet. But I like to believe that whatever I put out there, as long as I know that it's true, I like to believe that people who resonate with that will be attracted to what I put out there.
100%. So this podcast, I want to end with, what is one thing that this year, and it doesn't just have to be from the course, but maybe it will be, what's the biggest lesson you've learned?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. There's been so many. I'm constantly thinking about what the themes of this year has been. In terms of what lesson I have learned, I think what I will say is what I've been really present with is coming home to myself. So this year has been a year of so much shedding.
Year of the snake.
Right, year of the snake. The way I started this year has been, I'm such a different version of myself at the end of it. I knew this was going to be a really hard year. As I was telling you, we were out a couple days ago. I'm really good at predicting the energy and the themes of the year ahead. And I had a lot of anxiety going into 2025. I knew it was going to be a hard year. I knew it was going to require me to put in a lot of work. And I knew it was going to be uncomfortable. And it has been all of those things. But I have come home to myself in a way I never have before. I feel like I'm the most authentic version of myself. I am the least invested in manipulating how other people think about me. So yeah, I think maybe not the lesson necessarily, but that's really been the theme of this year, is just coming home to myself and making peace with the fact that a lot of people, including people who I thought really loved me, would not be comfortable with that.
I love that, coming home to yourself. I think mine would be acceptance, which is probably very similar, but just accepting. I think I was trying to, when we were talking about this a couple of days ago, because the last few years have not been great for me, I was going to try and force 2025 to be the best year ever, and it kept kicking my ass.
Oh, yeah.
Over and over again, and I felt like I was on the floor, and my lesson was to accept it. To accept it. This is where I'm at, to be on the floor and just to accept it. And then from that, I think came the gratitude. Mm-hmm. And that gratitude is what got me up again. And I know it will always will. I know no matter what happens, I accept, I have gratitude, and I will get back up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Thanks again for part 2. I absolutely loved it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
And for everyone at home, as always, stay kinky.